Since Vice President Harris picked hard left Governor Tim Waltz as her running mate, the media are already lying about his supposedly moderate and centrist record. Nicholas Fondacaro is associate editor of MRC Newsbusters, joining me now with more. Nick, thanks for coming on.
Thanks for having me.
Happy Friday. Okay, so we got this radical leftist, and I didn't know who he was. I feel almost ashamed to admit that even though I read the list of prospective people, there was a list of 10 and that was published a lot of different places. And I read that. I really didn't think she would choose an unknown from, Minnesota. I mean, it's an important state, obviously, but it's not one that we all often talk about when we're like, this is a state you must win. And so I was trying to figure out what is this? And I wanted to get your thoughts, Nick. What are they doing choosing someone this far to the left of her as opposed to someone more moderate? And I know Josh Shapiro had the issue of being Jewish and they have that anti-Semitism going on. So I get that. But there are others who could have been good.
Yeah, like I'm with you with not knowing too much about him, or at least before he was picked, because and it also seemed kind of weird that like after the pick came out, you had all these people sort of giving all their personal stories about dealing with him. It's like, when was he doing all of this stuff apparently? Yeah, like they definitely went with somebody who they see is to the left. You got to remember too, because the media since her nomination or her appointment as the nominee, really. The media have been doing their job to try to make her seem like the moderate candidate. We have a compilation of them just being like, oh, she's a centrist, she's a moderate, like completely forgetting that she was supposed to be, or gaslighting America into forgetting that she was supposed to be the liberal force to Biden's supposed moderation and centrism. And so now it's basically they have him playing the role of to the left and her of the moderate, and that's sort of the role that they're doing. And again, like you mentioned with Josh Shapiro, they're definitely trying to play to that, or at least trying to secure that very, very narrow marginal vote of anti-Semitism in the Democratic Party to make sure that they can win in November.
It's weird because there's a huge swath of independent voters who are not anti-Semitic, who have other concerns outside of that kind of Hamas coalition and, squad, the progressive squad that they've become so proud of, which they coincidentally have lost 2 of those squad members due to Ali Pak stepping in and saying, look, you can't outspend us. We have the money, we have the get out the vote effort. And now that you've shown an unwillingness to be willing to just allow Jewish people to live, we're going to go in and we're going to take out these candidates that you have put in who go against their core orthodoxy, which is we're alive, we've survived, and we're going to continue to live. Jewish people really have been just continually battered. And now it's their own party that's kind of taking after them. You're doing the heavy lifting here. I have a video clip I wanted you to respond to. It's your own. It comes from MRC TV. In this clip, you have journalists already lying through their teeth about moderate centrist Waltz. You put this together. Let's take a look, Nick.
The idea that Tim Walz is some lefty is just not true in reality. He got elected in a district that was very moderate.
Walz, of course, was very moderate in Congress.
Establishing himself as a moderate Democrat.
He had a pretty moderate record, rather moderate Democrat, viewed as a moderate Democrat.
He is a centrist. To say that he's more liberal than Vice President Harris or the most liberal congressman, which I'm sure we're going to hear, just not true.
In Congress, he was certainly a centrist, but a more centrist deal-making candidate.
Kind of a centrist Midwesterner in persona.
A more centrist type who can appeal to suburban voters.
We have heard from Democrats who know him who describe him as folksy, as somebody who can reach out to independents.
He will be able to pull over some of those more moderate voters.
He has a history of appealing to the more rural, moderate voter out there.
Moderates, even moderate Republicans.
Absolutely more moderate than people are giving him credit for right now. I would like someone to point out a place that he is different on an issue than Josh Shapiro.
Wow. So, Nick, I'll let you answer that last question from former Missouri U.S. Senator Claire McCaskill, who is so good. Like, I know why they hired her on to be a contributor at MSNBC. She is so good at taking something that is ludicrous and making it sound like it's absolutely bread and butter. She just sounds like your grandma coming in hot with, whatever her takes are. Is she right? Is Waltz near Shapiro on ideology?
Honestly, I don't know where they're able to come. Like, this is what we were just talking about. Their ability to just sort of gaslight it, and like all of them in unison, basically just saying moderate, 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 trying to they're lying about his record. Like, if you look at his ACU score, his American Conservative Union score, I believe his rating is like 8% or something like that, which puts him like in line with Adam Schiff, right? So it's like the idea that he is a moderate at all is ridiculous when you look at conservative metrics. And like last time I checked, a moderate isn't somebody like Waltz that's trying to get rid of people's gun rights, right? He wants to take away the weapons of war, so to speak, or like this phrase that they invented. And again, this is them trying to portray, like before the Waltz pick, you had them trying to claim Kamala was the moderate, and now he's the moderate force. They can't determine who's the moderate and who's the left and who's trying to be the swaying voice for the liberals and trying to bring in the centrists. They're trying to have it all the very good buzzwords, all of the flowery language is trying to go all the way in the Democrats' favor, while the media is parroting the Democratic talking point of Republicans are weird.
Yeah, and that's interesting because Governor Waltz actually, Nick, set up a hotline during COVID where neighbors could call in or send an email to report their neighbors for doing things they didn't like. And there's audio that they were able to get through a Freedom of Information Act request that was played on Fox News last night. You literally have people calling in saying, I saw kids playing outside together during COVID. They shouldn't be doing that. We need to take down that equipment so they can't play. There's a house on my neighborhood, on my street, where I saw people going in all day and they're hugging outside on the front stoop, and that can't be allowed during COVID. These are the kind of people who would literally hit you with a rock rather than help you if you tripped over on the sidewalk. They'd step over you across the street, but they're willing to call a hotline. And that kind of behavior is encouraged by Governor Waltz. And his daughter also reported what she knew about the deployment of the National Guard to the rioters who were burning the city down. So he shared that information with her and she disseminated it out on social media. So I can't see they're not even close. They're not even in the same quadrant of ideology, Shapiro and Waltz. They're not the same.
You made the point that I was just thinking of just now, comparing, like, you have these hotline to call in on neighbors being neighborly, trying to be together and not be lonely while everybody's trying to be apart. And meanwhile, you have the governor who was allowing all of this death and destruction to take the communities in his state. This again is they want to try to gaslight this. And you had, I believe it was a couple nights ago, Chris Cuomo was basically trying to claim it's like, oh, it wasn't a snitch line on neighbors. That's not what it was. Obviously, by the audio, that's exactly what it was being used for.
That's exactly what it was. I mean, the audio proves that people were sitting at home, and instead of watching their televisions or doing some deep rage cleaning, they were at their windows watching their neighbors. And if they saw people pulling in and out of houses, if they saw people getting out of cars or walking up to houses and going in and coming back out again, they were actually upset about it. Instead of finding out, the person might have been having meals delivered by friends because they were actually sick. Or, I mean, it really doesn't matter. It's your own private residence. This is still America. But Governor Waltz, he encouraged that behavior and never, ever took it back. If he'd step up to the podium, we have those issues. We also have his issue with the stolen valor, which I have been ripping into as an Air Force veteran. I'm not a combat veteran, but I am descended from combat veterans, fourth generation in my family to serve, third generation for my husband and his family to serve. We understand that it's not okay to say I'm a combat veteran if I'm not. I'm not a combat veteran. It's also okay to have Governor Waltz come out and basically step up to the podium and apologize for that stolen valor so that he can clear the record on that. He's not doing that. They just scrubbed the website on that issue.
Exactly. And the media is helping them sort of cover this up too, right? Where basically you have them being like, oh, Vance and Republicans are pouncing on this one comment where he claims to have been in combat. And then you had, I believe it was yesterday, Breonna Keeler on CNN, where basically she's suggesting that Vance was not in any sort of danger being a member of the military press. And the first female Marine to die in Iraq, I believe it was, what had held his type of position.
That's right. But this is their way. The only way to fight back is to support MRC TV and your work at Newsbusters. Nicholas Fondacaro, thank you for joining me. Happy weekend to you, sir.
You too. Thanks for having me.
You're welcome. Coming up, how is it possible for an illegal alien to commit 22 crimes in just 6 months? I'll tell you after this.